So, good afternoon, you guys. I want to do another tough story, and I want to talk about. I want to do a video series called The War on Autism. And what that means was that I was misdiagnosed with autism growing up, and my older brother is diagnosed with autism, but just like me, that we both were adopted out of abusive situations, and we did grow up with some emotional abuse and some slight abuse and some harshness. But obviously, and I'll say this, that like there's people who have grown up a lot worse, turned out a lot better. There's a lot of people who've grown up with worse and turned out worse. So sometimes it's not just calling somebody autistic. It's actually getting to know them and understand why they are the way they are, really. And I really think that that's always important to like mention, really. But there was a time in my life where my family thought that I was autistic, and they used a lot of harshness to teach me, just like how to socialize and good etiquette. Like I know, like I mentioned in another video, how I was forced to run track, and I remember like my father using intimidation or saying things like, "If you don't join the track team, no TV, no video games for the entire school year," and just intimidation and bullying to, get me to join the track team. So in this video, I want to talk about the brunch incident. So what happened was that in middle school, my little brother was adopted, and because he wasn't baptized, my family decided to baptize all of us. And then a few weeks after our baptism, we were having a we were having brunch with a couple of my dad's friends who were at the baptism. There was like over like at least 200 people, and I remember like one of my fathers. I'm gonna call him Rick. Rick. Let's call him Rick and Garrison. Let's be fun today. So like Rick was like asking me, was like saying like, "Do you remember the names of these people?" And I was kind of like, "No." And then my dad was kind of like looking at me like angry, looking, saying like, "How could you not remember these people? They gave you like $50 for your baptism. Mind you, my parents kept the money." And then my dad was like, "What do you know about these guys?" And I was like, they live in the United States, and I wasn't being smart or anything. It was just like my dad was kind of like, very like angry and just like, in my face and stuff like that. And then we took a car ride there, and my dad was like, talked to my other father, and he was like saying, "You know what, why are you mad? Why are you in a bad mood?" And then he was like saying things like, "You know what, I'm just mad because these fucking roses cost like $100." And then he said, "I'm also mad because Byron doesn't know the name of these people. He knows the fucking name of all those fucking Pokemon, and all he can tell me about these people that live in the United States." And then my father, Rick, looked at me and said, "You know what, you're a fucking asshole, Byron." And then my other father, Garrison, just like slapped him on the shoulder and said, don't talk to him like that. And it was one of those things too, that's just how Rick was. And I never really liked Rick because I remember he flipped over dinner tables, and he was always like very verbally abusive, like somebody with a lot of just like narcissism and a lack of emotional intelligence, which we always call it a Rick moment, where that's just when you are verbally abusive, you ruin everybody's day, you say things that are hurtful and offensive, and ultimately you trash and mess up property or whatever. And this is another example of that. Out of hundreds of people, you expect me to know the name of these people I've only met once in my life, really. And you're thinking that I'm ruder than, like, I'm the rudest kid in the world because I don't know their names. And also, too, how does that motivate somebody to learn the names of people if you're gonna call them like a fucking asshole, or just be like, you know the name of every fucking Pokemon and everything like that? Because it's kind of like what somebody's saying too, really, which is that if you were in a office setting and you had a coworker or an intern and you're trying to teach them how to do better in the workplace, and you talk to them exactly in that same way, you'd be down in HR really quickly, and they would fire you, or they would say, "Hey, you know what, you need to give you some anger management counseling." It's always like that thing too, with how a lot of people have that mentality when it comes to children, where it's like, you're my kid, I'll treat you just like a slave, really. Where, like with slaves, you can smack them, you can slap them, you can verbally abuse them, and they can't talk back really, because then again they know that they're going to get hit, or there's going to be worse verbal abuse. But as I said, there was a time when that was very common, which was like you curse at your kids, you bully your kids, you say like very hurtful things, because that if you say anything back, they get mad and say anything back, you smack them harder and knock them to the ground. That a child's place is to you know is to tolerate it. So there was also another thing that happened where my dad was like, okay, there's 12 people at the brunch. So both of you, me and my brother, are gonna have to remember the name of everybody. And if you guys don't do that, we're going to just get rid of your television, because it makes no sense that you know the name of all the Pokemon, but you don't know the name of all these people. Really, you're obsessed with TV. Really, so that brings me to another issue where there's gaslighting. You know, a lot of times in my life, but more so my brother, is that there's been bad experiences around making friends with people. Like, I moved like almost 10 times, between middle school and high school. Um, I was abused and bullied by camp counselors and different summer camps. It hurt me a lot as a little kid to always be moving around, and being taught you got to make a sacrifice for the family. Like, you make friends with people. Up, we're moving. Up, what? I wake up tomorrow. Up, we're moving. We're moving. We're moving. We're moving. So sometimes when you grow up with that, you just tend to not make friends really, because your parents move you around, and then my parents say something like, well, even though you lived in 4 or 5 different houses in New York City, that still counts as moving once really, because it's not like you moved, um, to a different state like 8 or 9 times really. No, that's just gaslighting. So when you have parents who don't understand, oh well, maybe there's a deeper story of why you don't like bond or connect with people, or if you met somebody of my friends and you only meet them once in life, and I've not seen these people since 1999 really. It doesn't make. Good etiquette says, okay, know the names of these people. Or sometimes it's good idea for the parents to say, okay, I want you to remember the names. Here are all the names of these people. Here are what they look like. Just because I want you to be respectful. Um, then that's different. But just like undermining and being like, okay, now it's just like, what, you and your brother are in the trenches. Really, you gotta know the name of these people. My brother was not good at that. My brother was also really stubborn. So it's almost like if I did it right and I showed respect and I did all that, my dad would just be like, okay, well, since your brother failed, you're both are punished, collective punishment, just like in Full Metal Jacket. Except I can't beat my brother with a bar of soap, really, for not being on my level, really, and for choosing to learn from these situations, really. But fortunately, we remember the names of all these people, and that was the end of it. But the point of it was that, and I'll reiterate that it was like what I call the war on autism, because some parents have children who are autistic and they have no patience for them. So sometimes they will do something like grab the child's television, smash it, threaten to kick their asses if they don't join track teams. Sometimes you deal with children who get bullied through their lives because they can't talk to their parents, because their parents are always going to flip out over everything. Or sometimes you have, children who are behind socially and they just don't develop good work relationships with people, because you're always taught, if you do not socialize, no TV, no video games, you're grounded. I'm going to smash your television. I'm going to make you remember the names of all the relatives, and you're going to know them, first name, last name, and you're going to like write it 100 times really. Like, it's just like it's just like like harshness. There are people who are autistic and that could benefit from bettering themselves socially, absolutely. But it's always about like approach really. And then also too, when we talk about nature versus nurture, there are some people with mental health issues who need to work on their social skills, and they grow up with depression, anxiety, sociopathy, and other issues because they have parents with no patience, or they have parents who have a mentality of, what, you're a fucking asshole if you don't know how to socialize with people. Like I said, I really think that, if I was the parent, I would be like, okay, well, um, I'm a little concerned that you know the names of these people. Let's talk about why don't you know their names and saying, okay, well, I meet them once in a life. We move around a lot, other things like that. Okay, getting to know your kid, that's good. And then I may be like, okay, well, why do you know the names of these people? Because it's just good etiquette. So it's because I don't want to be embarrassed, and it's also good etiquette. It embarrasses me for you guys not to know their names. And I'm understanding that you know what we only saw them once, and usually it's like a come and go really. Like usually you're not gonna see these people for the rest of your life really, but we gotta just walk in with some good etiquette. And I'm not trying to undermine you. It's just you know I gotta refresh you guys on who their names are, and I expect you to remember it. I remember it just for the party really, you know, and then that happens, you know. So again, you know, my approach would be a lot more patience, a lot more understanding. And then if you have kids who are stubborn and like say are and hard headed, you have to be like, no, it's good etiquette. You know, it's all about good etiquette. And if you don't want to have good etiquette, there are consequences for that. So it's important to teach your kids that socializing, knowing the names of people, or is important. And sometimes, like I said, if it's just like an in and out, you know that you see this person one time, and then you may see them in a couple of weeks, or or your kids are not expecting them to see these people again. You know, you got to be patient, and understanding of that. So, you know, if you want to just, you know, but also, too, you know, again, you got to think about your approach. If you're calling your kid a fucking asshole, you're talking about smashing their television, you're being like, you know what, Byron, you know, you like the anime, you know, noir, you know, all these characters, you know, fuck that shit. You know, they know the name of fucking real people. Or, oh, Byron, you're a big Simpsons fan, South Park fan, you know, you're a fucking asshole for knowing all the fucking South Park characters, knowing all the fucking Simpson characters. You know, what the fuck is that when you can't know the name of their real fucking people, you know. If you talk like that and that verbal abuse and stuff like that, you know, it's not going to motivate anybody really to, you know, socialize and connect with people, because you're saying, okay, you know what, your parents are just going to be mean and impatient when you are actually trying to, you know, connect and bond with people. So it's always really important about your approach, really. And also, too, that you also have to understand, just like the movie Full Metal Jacket, you can have a very strict approach. You can threaten to smash your child's television, rip up all their Pokemon cards, or threaten to smack them or verbally abuse them. But the other thing too is that you know what your message, my parents' message, is to have good etiquette, and also that you know again we're having a brunch, we're having good food. Oh well, do you think I would want in my 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s to socialize with friends if this is just how I'm brought up with? Oh well, you know, if you don't socialize with people and you don't meet my parents' standards, it's going to be a bunch of profanity and a threat to have your property destroyed. You know, do you think that's going to motivate somebody to be like, you know, hey, you know, I want to, you know, be like Hank Hill and have a big cookout with the neighbors? Oh, well, I want to be like, you know, breakfast at Tiffany's. I've never seen breakfast at, oh yeah, I've seen breakfast at Tiffany's, but I'm just joking. You know, I want to have like breakfast in New York or whatever with my friends. You know, it doesn't teach that. It just teaches, you know what, harshness, resentment, undermining, and ultimately, like, you know, taking the fun out of getting to know people. Like, oh, well, you know what, getting to know people is, you know, a difference between being grounded and having your property destroyed and then actually, you know, like learning on good skills, really, you know. So just remember, like, how your approach is always important, really. And if you want to, you know, teach kids who have mental health issues or autism or other disabilities where it's hard for them to socialize, you have to do better. But also, too, you know, you got to get to know your kids. You know, like, honestly, like, me and my brother both had a bunch of trauma, dealt with bullying, narcissistic parents, threats, and other things to motivate us to do bigger, better in life. So, you know, again, you know, it's not knowing your kid or not knowing where they come from and then guiding them on the right path, really. You know, so it's ultimately, that's why patience is very important. But also harshness patience is important, but also having a standard is important. And you got to marry the two together, really. You sometimes, like I said, if you're too lenient, then you're going to have kids like Amelia Rose Or if you're like too harsh, you're gonna have Gomer Pyle in Full Metal Jacket. Or you're gonna have people who just grow up and just said, fuck friendship, fuck being friends with people, because it's always like, a bad experience when that happens.